Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I am Kelly. Happy 2025. I am going to be going over my favorite books by genre for 2024. I don't have like a top 10 that I do or anything like that. I just go by my favorite books in different genres, and that's how I do this. So let's start with classics. So first of all, I want to mention Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. When a book just exceeds your expectations so much. I buddy read this back in May with Dia from Novel ID, and she'd been through the book several times before. So it's always fun when you're reading a book with someone that has read it before and has seen it from different angles and sides through many different readings. So I really enjoyed reading it with her. We follow a girl named Molly, and she goes through changes. It's always been her and her father. Her father remarries. Maybe not the best stepmother choice for her. She gets a new stepsister. There's some unrequited love, but I think just the different relationships and seeing how people interrelate to each other and just how she writes characters is where Elizabeth Gaskell just shines. I'm filming outside. Must be time for airplanes to fly overhead. So I just absolutely enjoyed that one. Another one that I read by Elizabeth Gaskell, I read Cranford too, which I did enjoy, but it just didn't make my favorites list, is Ruth. And I actually, buddy, read this with In Search of Wonder. And Ruth is a young lady that finds herself in a terrible position, and she decides to just try to rise above it as much as possible. She is helped by some wonderful people, and I think the thing I enjoyed the most was talking to Anne from In Search of Wonder about, elements of faith, and was it right to not tell the whole truth in this or that circumstance? And it was just such an interesting look at morality and faith and kindness and turning the other cheek and not treating people as second-class citizens for things they've done in the past. I really enjoyed it. Okay, and then Agnes Gray. I buddy read this. This is by Anne Bronte, and I buddy read this with Chrissy from Chrissy's Purple Library, and this was such a good book. I think what I loved about it was you saw simple Agnes, who has to become a governess, nanny type person because of her family's circumstances. Her father has been a pastor, and he's always tried to please his family, and he's overspent, and so Agnes has to get work and employment, but you see her loving family's life contrasted with these people who have so many issues but so much money. I loved the love in the book as well, and it was just such a beautiful classic. I love Anne Bronte's writing. It is just so wonderful. All right, going on. My Cousin Rachel. This was a buddy read with both Chrissy from Chrissy's Purple Library and Bethany from Bethany Brings Books. I found out this year, unfortunately, we will not talk about this book, but there is at least one Daphne du Maurier book that I do not like at all, but My Cousin Rachel just is another one that I love from her. We have this young man who has been raised by his cousin. He is his heir, and his cousin goes overseas for his health. He marries someone named Rachel, who happens to be, his cousin as well, back in the times where that was kosher to marry your cousin. And he hates her. He thinks that thinks that maybe she did something to his cousin. She comes to visit, and he finds her charming, but is Rachel who she seems to be? We had so many discussions about this book, just on and on and on about this book. It was just such a good, mysterious, gothic feeling book where you just don't know who's right, who's wrong, what the heck is going on. So another classic I really love was The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I, of course, buddy read this with Courtney Reed. She's my Dostoevsky person. And I wouldn't say this is my favorite of all time, but it was a favorite classic of the year. That's how much I liked it. And I really enjoyed the main character. He's called the Idiot. People think he's dumb because he's kind of compassionate to a fault. and just how he cares and relates for others. And the book is like a lot of Dostoevsky's books. It's about personal relationships. It talks about the differences in classes and things like that. One thing that cracked me up was there's this one character who has like tuberculosis basically, and he's just dying, and he's just wandering around doing things. Why did that happen? Pausing for a cough. And I'm back. So now I'm going to go to my favorite children's books that I've read. I'm going to lump, and a lot of times with my children, I'm going to lump the classic children's, the middle grade, all the things, all in one category, and fantasy children's books, all in one thing. So here we go. The first one is a classic children's book. That is Under the Lilacs by Louisa May Alcott. I read this for Alcott April. We deal with a little boy who has had a very, hard time. He thinks his father, is away working, trying to get him to come with him. He was left behind with the circus they worked for. He doesn't get to stay with the circus. He has a dog, and he finds these little girls who take to him, and the mother is very kind. And then there's a woman who wants to just kind of like adopt him. So we have the community, and I just love the way that this book is wrapped up with so much love and a good surprise, and it was just so beautiful. Love it. All right, next I'm going to talk about two Jack Zulu books by S.D. Smith. We've got Jack Zulu and the Waylander's Key, and we've also got Jack Zulu and the Girl with the Golden Wings. So these books my kids were riveted by these books. These are fantasy. Jack Zulu is, his father has died, his mother is very sick, and he ends up with this key basically to another dimension, and there are special things about him. His friend group is amazing. I just really, really enjoyed these books. Just so much light and truth, as I've said before, in S.D. Smith's stories. He also wrote this with his son, J.C. Smith. So a father and son duo team. I'm going to have to do one of these because my tripod is shaking in the wind. Anyway, speaking of S.D. Smith, I read Mooses with Bazookas with my whole family. And this is not your feel-good S.D. Smith fantasy book. Well, there's fantasy because we have Mooses with Bazookas, but this is just funny. And I could have recommended this for Epistolary January because we have so many letters from Captain Warmbottom, who is quite a character. So if you need a good laugh, if your kids need a good laugh, if life is feeling too heavy, Mooses with Bazookas by S.D. Smith. Then we have Pages and Co. This is the first book in the Bookwanderers series, The Bookwanderers by Anna James. It is a slightly different title in the UK, Tilly and the Bookwanderers. All right, so I already read this with Chatty the Mad Chatter and Bandana Book Mom. They're my middle grade fantasy girls. And this was an absolutely lovely book. This is about a girl who can literally book wander, and she can go to visit characters like Anne of Green Gables, Alice in Wonderland. So much fantasy, whimsy. Loved it. All right, now we're going to go into nonfiction. So I read, back to holding it, The Blessings of Humility, and this is by Jerry Bridges. I really like his book, Respectable Sins. It's about sins that we tolerate in our lives that really aren't so respectable. And so I think humility is something that everyone on the planet needs more of, and I really loved the way he brought God's truth to light using his word as his source. So it was just really wonderful. I also really loved Gentle and Lowly. I'm blanking on the author, by Dane C. Ortlund. It definitely talks about Jesus and how he was divinely human and how he was so, again, the humility is what is emphasized. And I think this is a good book for those of you who know that you are saved by grace but seem to think you need to keep earning your salvation. Not necessarily because you've been taught that way, but because that is your personality. the fact that that is not the truth is really emphasized in this book. And then last but not least, actually I've got two more. One is Walden, and that was by Henry David Thoreau. I read this actually during Alcott April 2. Courtney Reeds and I read this together. I feel like Thoreau is such a gorgeous writer, and I do not believe everything that Thoreau believed. For sure, we had some differing beliefs, but I loved the way he talked about life and things around him, and just the way he discussed honestly and openly things. I really enjoyed it. All right, and then now, last but not least, this is a memoir, Dinner with Vampires, by the actress Bethany Lenz, and she talks about how while she was in her acting career and everybody thinks, wow, she's doing hunky-dory great, you know, that was the Oklahoma thing to say, sorry, but everybody is thinking she's doing fantastic. And then her little Bible study that she went to, it was like a little Friday or Saturday night Bible study in Burbank, California, started getting weird, and she didn't recognize it at first, and these people take control of her money, take control of her whole life. There were a lot of other actors, people you might know, who were involved in this. She changed the names, but I was able to figure out, based on a show that my mom used to watch, and understanding the connection between those actors. But yeah, I think it's good for people to read in case you ever know anybody that kind of gets caught up into something like that. All right, now, adult and YA fantasy. Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Cinderella is a cyborg. It is so good. This is YA clean fantasy, and my daughter and I really enjoyed reading it together. A Fire Endless by Rebecca Ross. This is a sequel to, what was the first book? I'll pop the first book up on the screen. And it was just so beautifully written. So we have basically a man who makes magic happen with his musical gifts. There is another area in this magical land who is opposed to him, and someone that he has a connection with is sent over there. So dealing with the opposing factors, and he has these magical gifts, and it was really interesting fantasy. All right, next, The Well of Ascension. This is the second book in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. So this series, I don't want to say too much about it. We have a girl who, you know, people have, might occasionally have a gift with metal, and this girl has a gift with all the metals. So it is very interesting magical system. Don't want to say too much about the romance if you haven't read book one, but I really enjoyed this series so far. And then two books by Nadine Brandis. First is Romanov. This is a historical fiction fantasy dealing with the Romanov family. Again, this is YA. I read it with my daughter. We really enjoyed the magical realism element in it and the historical details that she included in it and the well-researched work she did. The next one by her is The Nightmare Virus. This is dystopian sci-fi, and I don't think this one is for everyone. It is a little bit on the nose at points, and it definitely, all of her books have Christian elements to it. This one is very on the nose and very out there about how sin affects you, which I love. Tripod again, but I don't know if everyone would love that. I think that the story itself is good enough that if you do not believe like me, you would still like it, but it is just very distinctly Christian in its theology, but it is a fiction book. Clearly it's sci-fi dystopian. All right, and mysteries. All right, I loved The Vanishing at Castle Maro by Jamie Jo Wright. So we have a castle, a mysterious, very creepy castle where women have disappeared, and we're unleashing why that is. I love the reasoning behind it. It was such a good book. And then my Cozy Mysteries by Jacqueline Frost. These were Christmas ones I read this year. The Knife Before Christmas and Slashing Through the Snow. nobody doesn't like Jacqueline Frost slash Julie Ann Lindsay slash Bree Baker as far as cozy mysteries go, and how we get those wonderful, feel good, cozy feelings while still, you know, solving a murder mystery. Anyway, I hope you guys read some good books in 2024. I hope you read even better ones in 2025 and read a lot. Bye-bye. I'm back. I forgot one book. I didn't forget the book. I remembered it. I was like, wait, why didn't I see that? Because I only had one in historical fiction in my notes, and that was A Girl Called Samson by Amy Harmon. And this was a buddy read with Bethany's bookshelf. It was such a fun buddy read. So this is a girl who basically pulls a Mulan and pretends to be a man to fight in the Revolutionary War. She has her reasons. She's come from an interesting background where family has rejected her a lot of it actually. And so she's been servanted out to this one family, has all boys, and they kind of encourage her to be strong and resilient, and interesting dynamics there. But she ends up having a pastor that really believes in her, and a friend that she writes with that is connected to that pastor, and even this lady's husband who is involved in the war has just helped awaken her mind, and she goes and joins Revolutionary War. And the romance that evolves in the story is very interesting. There are lots of interesting conversations on womanhood and a woman's role, and I think the different sides of that argument did the arguments justice, and it was so fun to read it with Bethany. I will say chapter 24 is more descriptive than I would like in a romance. It is not smutty, but it is more descriptive than I would like. But then Bethany and I got to meet in real life because we're from the same state, which was awesome. So I'm sorry for this little excerpt. Go ahead and read a lot in the new year. Bye-bye. Just kidding. You thought I was done when I came back for a PS, but this is a PPS because I forgot to talk about the Unexpected Mrs Polyax. So this is by Dorothy Gilman. My daughter and I read it together, and she was very upset with me when she realized I'd forgotten to put it on. This is a cute elderly woman who wants excitement in her life, tries to join, like, you know, was it the CIA or the FBI? One of those two. Anyway, she ends up getting involved in something and getting kidnapped, and she's hysterical. The characters are great. This was so well done. If you need a laugh and you like good mysteries, The Unexpected Mrs Polyax by Dorothy Gilman. Now I'm really leaving. Read a lot. Bye-bye.